everyone, welcome back to White Sparrow Living, Luke 12:6. I'm Wendy, and today we're doing some Dollar Tree DIYs for your farmhouse home decor. In this episode, I'm going to be using foam board in every one of our projects, and I can't wait for you to see what I come up with. If you like these projects, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it so that you can be notified every single time I upload a video. And now, without further ado, let's get started. For this project, I'm going to be using one piece of poster board in white and then 2 pieces of foam board. These are 20 inches by 30 inches, so I'm going to cut it down right in the middle going lengthwise, so I'll have 2 10-inch pieces. And I'm using my craft knife to go right through that. Make sure you have a cutting mat underneath so you don't cut your surface. And then once I get that cut down, I'm going to make this into a 4-foot sign, so I'll cut that down a little bit, and then using some packing tape, I'm going to put those 2 pieces together. And I'm going to come back a little bit later to reinforce that seam. And then using my second piece of foam board, I'm going to measure some strips about 1.25 inches wide, and this is going to be our frame, which I'll come back and paint later. So now I'm going to take my poster board and I'm going to cut that down into 5-inch strips. I first cut it down 10 inches and then I'll half that and make those 5 inches. And these are going to become our boards or our planks, kind of like to look like wood. But I'm going to cut these on the diagonal, so when I put them together, it'll make a chevron pattern. So I'm going to angle the edges, I guess that would be a miter, and then put them together. But to make them look a little more like wood, I'm taking a stamp pad and I'm going to highlight the edges and kind of make it distressed so that you can actually see the difference in the planks. Now, I saw a sign like this outside of somebody's house. I wasn't like creeping or anything, but I just thought it was so stinking cute. So I thought it would be fun to try to replicate that using foam board instead of wood. Now to get my planks down, I'm going to be using some double-sided Scotch tape, but Dollar Tree also carries some double-sided tape. You would just have to cut it every time instead of just ripping it off of the roll like I'm doing here. Obviously, this won't be able to be out in the weather or as far, if it's wet outside or raining, but in the summer, everything is good. It's all dry, and so my sign is holding up beautifully. So once I get all of my planks in place, I'm going to turn this over, and on the pieces where I didn't quite measure exactly right or didn't cut it right, I'm going to cut those excess pieces off using my craft knife. And you guys know I like to just eyeball things, so they weren't all perfect. So now I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in ink and I'm going to paint my trim black. Because this is foam board, it will roll up on you because of the wet paint. So a trick to kind of keep it flat is to make sure that you paint both sides. So once you paint one side and it dries, it'll roll a little bit, but then once you turn it over and paint the other side, it's going to flatten back out. And then once that paint is completely dry, I'm going to use my hot glue gun to attach and piece those together all the way around my sign. So the message on the porch sign that I had seen said, "Oh, hello there," and I thought that was really cute, but I was contemplating whether or not I should try writing this myself or possibly cutting it out of my vinyl cutter. I wasn't really sure, but then I remembered that a couple of years ago, maybe 1.5 years ago, the sweet people at Essential Stencil sent me this stencil. That's hard to say, but I couldn't believe that it actually said, oh hello there. And guess what the measurements are on this? It is exactly 4 feet by 10 inches. So I knew Jesus was helping me with this project, and so that's what I decided to use. So I'm taking a sponge dauber and I'm going to use my black chalk paint to go over that stencil, and this is really fun. I just held it down. It doesn't matter if it's a little bit messy or you get complete coverage. We want this to look a little bit worn, but more so just to make it look like it's a wood sign. Now, because my sign, the backboard was the measurements of 4 by 10, the ends where it's the top of where it says O, and then at the bottom where it says there was a little bit over the edge, so my frame was in the way. So I had to cut the bottom down a little bit on my stencil to get it in there. And then once all of my letters were down, I'm going to go back in and cover up those little pieces, you know, where it's separated so the stencil stays together, and make it all solid. And then once it was all done, I went back in with some stir sticks and gave it some more support using my hot glue, and it was done. And here it is all finished, and I am so in love with this sign. I was so happy to find that stencil. You guys know the last couple of years have been a bit of a blur, so it was really exciting to see this little sweet sign from Jesus to help me out. I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For this project, I'm using some scrap foam board, a ruler, my craft knife, and then 2 Dollar Tree vases. One is 9 inches and the other one is 6 inches. So I'm going to take my vases and roll it along my foam board to see how tall I need to have it cut. And then I'm just going to make 1-inch strips with my ruler and cut those down using my craft knife. I find it easier to just cut without a straight edge because it doesn't need to be perfect, but if you just glide your blade across that line, it comes out pretty straight. So now I'm going to take my little planks and I'm going to start hot gluing them to the side of my vase. As you can see, some of them weren't even cut all the way along the bottom there, but it doesn't matter. I can just glue those on there and make them look like little wooden planks. And I'm going to do that with the small one as well. And then to make it look like they're not covered in foam board strips, I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in white and just paint those down. And then my paintbrush that I used to paint my frame of our last DIY, it was still in the water, so I just pulled that out, got it a little dried off, and then ran it down those creases so that would give it some definition. And then I'll go around the top and the bottom to give it some distressing. And then I just took some jute twine and wrapped it around the top and the bottom, tied the top one in a sweet little bow, and this will keep your planks from rolling up since we only painted it on one side. And you can use this as a vase. I think these would be really cute for desk organizers. You could put your tall stuff in the tall vase and then your pencils in the smaller one. You could paint this whatever color you want to. And I think it would be really cute if you did a rainbow pattern for a kid's room. Or as you've seen me do before, you can turn these upside down and use them as pillar candle holders. But here they are, all finished, and I love how these turned out, and I hope you guys like them too. For this next project, I'm going to make a big circle on my foam board, and the way I did that was cut a piece of string and I'm going to attach it to a pencil and to a little dowel rod. Now, one thing you do want to do, and I had to learn this the hard way, you do want to make your string a little bit loose on your dowel so that it will go all the way around and so it doesn't get wonky on one side. If you do have any wonkiness on your circle, you can always use sandpaper and get that all nice and neat. I'm going to be putting some greenery over this little bumpity bump so you won't even see it. So now I'm going to take some black and white gingham adhesive from the Dollar Tree, and I had a sweet sweet friend send this to me, and I haven't been able to use it yet, so this was a perfect chance to do that. So I'm just going to take it and put it on the bottom portion and the top portion of my circle, and I measured about 6 or 7 inches. I want the top to be a little bit longer or come down further, leaving a white space in between, because my greenery is going to go on the top of this round wood sign. Well, it's not wood, you know, this faux wood sign. So once I get my vinyl placed on there, I'm going to go around the edges and cut it down, cut off a lot of excess, and then I'm going to make little snips so that when I turn it over, I can pull those over onto the back so that they stick and they make a nice rounded edge. So now I'm taking my black Sharpie and I'm just going to write the Curtis family. You could of course use your vinyl cutting machine to make the letters, or you could do the transfer method if you don't like your handwriting. I'm using that faux calligraphy look where you make all of your downstrokes a little bit thicker than the rest of the word. So use whatever method works best for you. So now to embellish the top, I'm going to take 2 bundles of some Dollar Tree greenery, and I'm just going to overlap those and meet them in the middle and zip tie that with a nylon zip tie, also from Dollar Tree. I made a little hole in the top so that I could run a second zip tie through the first zip tie and then run it back through the hole and attach it on the back of the sign. And since it's summertime, I thought I would use some of this pretty Dollar Tree lemon themed ribbon, and I'm just going to make a perky bow by rolling it over a few times. I think I ended up with 3 loops on each side, and then I'll fold that over in half and then give it little snips on each side. And at first I wasn't going to add a tail, but then decided I could with this greenery because it'll kind of hang really pretty. So I'm going to snip that as well and then run a chenille stem right through the middle and make sure that it goes into those little snips. And then I'll foof out my loops, dovetail the ends of my ribbon, and then feed that onto my greenery. So Dollar Tree also carries these sweet little styrofoam lemons, so I'm going to poke those onto a skewer and then poke it into the top of my sign. So I used a total of 5 lemons on this piece, and then on the back I'm going to take a little sawtooth hanger. I get these from Amazon and I'll have them linked in the description box below, but these are perfect for hanging any kind of project, and they come in about 100, I think it is. So I'm just going to poke that into the back of my foam board and then cut off all of my zip tie excess, and it's done. And here it is all finished, and I think this turned out so pretty. And it just goes to show you, you don't have to spend a whole lot to make something super cutie patootie. I love it, and I hope you guys like it too. Here's another super quick and easy project using our scrap foam board. I'm using some Dollar Tree adhesive vinyl in red, white, and blue, a coordinating infinity scarf, some white wood Dollar Tree beads, and some white string. So if you guys like to make fireplace garlands or beaded things, it's super helpful to use a wide-eyed needle, and I got mine in a pack from Walmart and I use it for a lot of projects. So I'm going to cut 3 5x7 rectangles out of my foam board using my craft knife, and then I gave them a little triangular cut on the bottom to make them look like little banner flags. And once I cut the first one out, I'm going to use that as a template for the other two. And I should mention, all of these projects are much faster and cleaner if you're using a sharp blade, because a dull blade will kind of rip up your foam board when you're cutting it down. So I went through 70 11 blades for this video. So now I'm going to put my adhesive vinyl onto my foam board, and the easiest way to do this is to cut down your adhesive vinyl and then lay it with the sticky side up, and then place your foam board right on top of it. And then again, using a sharp blade, I'm going to go around the edges and cut off the excess. And then once my flags were covered, I went in with a Sharpie and made block letters of USA. And I didn't really like my lettering for this one. And sadly, I found a Dollar Tree sign that had the cutest chipboard USA letters, but I didn't find it until after this video was done. So just know that that's an option. And I'm going to try and make these letters a little cuter by putting some pointies at the top. I tried to make them close to the same size. I don't know. It was, you know, it's handmade, so whatever. It is what it is. And then I'm going to put at the top of the red one, God, and then the white one will say bless, and then the blue one will say the, so it will say all together, God bless the USA. So now to put my banner together, I threaded my needle with the string and then fed on a white bead. And then I went into my first flag on the top corner from the front, and then back out from the back on the other corner, if that makes sense. So most of the string will be on the back side of each of my banners. And then I'll feed on another 2 beads and then do the same thing with the next flag until I get all of my beads and all of my flags onto my string. So now I'm going to cut strips out of my infinity scarf, and I just did the width of each of those diamonds so that they would all be the same size. And I'm just going to tie little knots in between. I did, I think, 4 in the middle and then 4 on the end and between each of my little flags. Now I'm going to take some 5/8 inch ribbon, and this was just scrap ribbon I had left over. I'm going to add that in between each of my little pieces of fabric and tie those into knots as well, just for some more color. And then I never tie anything too tight so that when I go to put it on whatever I'm hanging it on, in this case my fireplace mantle, I can move those around to make it the right length. Then I'm going to take some Dollar Tree stars that I had just to give my little flags a little more cuteness, and I'm putting one at the top and one at the bottom. These do have adhesive on the back where you just pull off a little backing paper, but I decided to go ahead and give it some hot glue just to make sure they stayed snug as a bug in a rug. And here it is all finished, and I think it turned out pretty darn cute. And yes, this crazy country definitely needs God's blessings right now. And I also wanted to point out the long box on top of my mantle with the flowers in it. I also made that a while back using foam board, and I'll link that video in the description box below. For this next project, I'm going to be cutting out 2 12x12 squares out of my foam board. And on one of them, I'm going to cut it down in half, and I'm going to paint one of them in my black chalk paint and one of them in my white chalk paint. Again, so that it doesn't curl up on you or bend, I'm going to make sure that I paint it on both sides. So I like like to get all of my painting done at the same time, so I'm going to take this acrylic little dish from the Dollar Tree and remove the sticker. I'm going to paint this, so before I do, because it's such a shiny flat surface, I'm going to sand it up a little bit, and then using my Folk Art Pure Gold metallic paint, I'm going to give that a couple of coats so that it's not see-through anymore. And then once it dries, I'm going to take the leftover scraps. Boy, I have used this little napkin for so many projects. I had a couple of them that Olivia at Olivia's Romantic Home sent me when we did a Dollar Tree supply swap video. And so I'm gonna meticulously cut around some of these really pretty flowers. I'm gonna be turning this project into kind of a Mackenzie child style home decor piece. So I'm taking my napkin pieces and I'll take my Mod Podge and put it onto my plate. I'm gonna be using it upside down. So this is gonna become the stand of what will become a little checkerboard. And once I get it onto the side of my dish, I'm going to go over it to make sure it stays on there. I didn't have a whole lot of pieces left, so I ended up just kind of piecing them together, letting the edges go over the ends. It's not super visible unless you're standing far away from it once we put the board on top, but it gives it just enough Mackenzie child style so that you know what it is. And I wanted my board to be lifted, so I think this gives it just enough of that perfect touch. So now that everything's perfectly dry and in place, I'm going to take my hot glue gun and put a gob of glue on the bottom of my plate and then attach it right to the center of my 12 by 12 foam board. Now I'm going to take my black and white pieces and I'm going to measure those down into little squares that are 1.5 by 1.5 inches. And this doesn't have to be perfect either, but in order for them to all fit together on my base piece, I did try to do a pretty good job in my measuring. So now that all of my pieces are cut, it's time to start applying them to my base, and there's going to be a total of 64 pieces. You'll have 32 black and 32 white, and so thank goodness for quick editing and fast forward speed. This was so much fun, and before I edited this and took out a whole bunch of it, I found myself watching the entire segment and was just kind of mesmerized. So I cut it down for you guys. So enjoy this part. So once everything's put together and my squares are all in place, you can see that double thickness of the board, and that's going to help with the durability. So the reason I made this was I received this amazing gift from one of our viewers, Bren. And if you're not familiar with Mackenzie Childs, this is the checkerboard pattern that's so popular. And she sent me this Christmas ornament. And my heart, you know, the cardinal representing a lost loved one. And it was just so special. And I thank her so much from the bottom of my heart. So I'm also going to use the box as kind of inspiration to make that branded Mackenzie Child styled highlighting on my checkerboard. So I'm taking my pure gold again, and I'm just going to go along the edges of one side. We're kind of just dirtying them up a little bit, but with gold, so it has a little bling to it. And then I'm going to go back in with my white chalk paint and kind of make it look more authentic. Now, foam board is covered in paper on the top and bottom, so every now and then some of that paper would separate from the foam. If that happens, and it did for me on a couple of the squares, I just went in with my hot glue and pushed it back down. So while you're watching me paint, I did want to mention how absolutely appreciative and humbled I am for all of the support and love I've been receiving. I could probably do a whole video showing all of the sweet Perky prizes and cards you guys have been sending to me. I wish I could just hug each and every one of you. Some of you have reached out through email, Instagram, Facebook. I think that's all the social media places, but just sending prayers and words of encouragement. And as usual, I'm behind in responding, but I want you to know sincerely how full my heart is knowing you're thinking about me. So thank you so much for being the light. So now once all my highlighting is done, to finish this off, I'm gonna paint in those squares on the side of my board and distress those up as well. And then I'm using some of Dollar Tree's little pebbles or rocks or marbles, you know, they're flat on one side. I use some blue ones and some clear ones. And so when you're playing this, when you get kinged, you just turn the little pebble over and it's flat on the top side. And you can easily see that that piece can go anywhere. And my grandkids have been having such a good time using my little checkerboard. I have it sitting on my coffee table, and that's the first place they go to when they want to play a game at Grandma and Pop's house. So I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For this next project, I'm going to be using one piece of foam board and then some roving yarn that I had from Walmart. I got this a long time ago and they don't carry it anymore, at least not in my Walmart. So I did have to order some more rolls on Walmart.com. I was one letter short, darn it. So I'm going to take my foam board and cut that down into 4 equal pieces. And then I'm going to freehand some letters, and I'm spelling out the word pray. You could do home, you could do farm, you can do whatever words you want to do. I'm doing this freehand, and I'll just get my letters on each of these pieces, and then I'm going to go back with a straight edge and kind of measure out the thickness so that my letters look all uniform. This is a good time where you could use the transfer method, or not the transfer method really, just print out the big letters on an 8.5 by 11 piece of, copy paper on your word processor or whatever you use, and then just trace along those letters so that you get perfect uniform letters as well. And then once I get my pencil marks down, I'll go in with my craft knife and make sure it's sharp and cut those letters out. So if you are doing this freehand, I have a couple of little tricks for you. On my R, if you're doing the word pray, I did my P, I traced out my P after I cut it out, and then I'm just gonna add the little line of the R to my P so that they look the same. And then on your Y, or any letter that's the same on both sides, once I cut out one side, I'm gonna flip it over onto the other side so that both of those angles of that Y are exactly the same. So now it's time to wrap our letters, and I'm just using my hot glue and placing that on the back, getting it nice and secure, and then I'm just going to start wrapping my letter. Now this roving yarn is especially messy and kind of comes apart. That's why it's so pretty. But because it's nice and chunky, you're able to piece together parts and get through all of those lines of the letters. So there are other chunky yarns that you can use for this project if you don't want to deal with the stuff on your fingers, the little strands and so forth. And you also don't have to make the letters as large as I'm making them, but I think it's so pretty and soft. But make it your own in whatever size, color, styles you want to use. So once I get my letters completely covered, I'm going to take some Dollar Tree burlap flowers, and I did a little trio in each area on each of my letters. And I think this is so pretty in the neutrals and browns and tans and whites. Now I'm doing this so that it matches my living room, but I think this would be so pretty with some pink flowers, and that would have been perfect in Cadence's bedroom. So whatever you do, it's going to be pretty. And here it is all finished, and I think this turned out so pretty. I used command hooks and just kind of pushed it into the foam board so that it would stay hung. And then if it was a little wonky or side heavy, I just rolled up a little piece of painter's tape to keep that straight. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For this next project, I cut out another circle, and this is 11.5 inches in diameter, and I thought I might be able to use that ring for something else at a later date. So I'm going to use some Dollar Tree yarn, and I have a really pretty green, some purple, a light pink. I was going to use the dark pink instead of the red, but I wasn't sure, and I didn't decide until after I had my piece going, but you'll see why in just a second. And so I'm going to take a Dollar Tree cross and mark the middle portion of it so that I can poke a hole into my foam board, because I'm going to be wrapping it using these yarns. So I need a place to go in between as I'm wrapping. And that hole's going to get bigger and bigger as I go because there's going to be so much yarn in there. And I also forgot to show you the white yarn that I'm going to be using. This is that like lashy yarn, but you could of course just use regular white yarn for this instead. So before starting, I graphed out my color section. I'm making a calendar, but this is not just a regular calendar. This is going to be what I call a Jesus calendar. And the calendar we all use today was put into effect in the 1500s by Pope Gregory the 13th, and it's called the Gregorian calendar. And just like that one, the liturgical calendar, which is what this is actually called, has a 12-month cycle and shows the highlights of Jesus's life using different colors to represent each season. And once I get these all onto my board, I'm going to start threading my yarn through that hole and around the edge and start covering those pie slices. So the liturgical year starts on the first Sunday of Advent, which is 4 weeks long, and that's the color purple, which is symbolic of royalty. But on the third Sunday, pink is used, just like you see 3 purple candles and 1 pink candle on an Advent wreath, which means baby Jesus is almost here. And then the Christmas season is going to be in white, and that represents the purity, light, and glory of Jesus. And that's going to end with Epiphany on January 6th. Then we go to ordinary time, represented with green, and it's not called ordinary because it's not important. It's ordinal, as in counted or numbered. And then that's going to bring us to the 40 days of Lent, which is again in purple, but this season it's representing being sorry for our sins, repentance, reflection, and just preparing our hearts for what's about to happen. Then Lent's going to end with the last 3 days of what's called the Triduum, try for 3. And I'm going to do mine in the color red, which is the color for Good Friday and represents the blood of Jesus. And then the Easter season, again, is going to be in white, when Jesus comes back to life and spends 40 days on earth explaining how to run his church. And then he's going to ascend back into heaven on Ascension Sunday, which I'm going to do in pink. And then the white of Easter season continues for another 10 days, when on the 50th day, called Pentecost, Penti for 50, that's when he sends down the Holy Spirit to help us in this crazy life. And that's red to represent the fire that the Bible describes. And then that's going to complete the Easter season, and then we start another longer period of ordinary time. And green represents life and growth. So as pretty as this is on the front side, the back side is a hot mess, so I'm just going to clean that up by cutting off those excess strands from my yarn. And then to give this some farmhouse flair, I'm going to attach this to a Dollar Tree charger. Now you could leave this gold because I think it's really pretty, but to match my home, I'm going to paint it white and give it some distressing. So I'm also going to be painting my wooden cross from the Dollar Tree using my white chalk paint, and I'm going to do the outside only of my charger. And I think it's really pretty when these little bumpity bumps get distressed and really pop out. It reminds me of the farmhouse beads that you see on a lot of home decor. So normally I would have filled my hole at the top of my cross with some spackle or putty of some sort, but mine was dried out, so I couldn't do that. So instead I'm going to use some hot glue and just fill it in and then paint it completely white. So to get that weathered and distressed look onto this, I'm going to take my Waverly wax in antique and I'm going to dry brush it onto the edge of my charger. And then I'm also going to go over my cross and get that nice and distressed looking too, just so it doesn't look brand new and gives it some more farmhouse character. And then as always, any place that you're a little heavy-handed with your distressing or you need to lighten it up a little, just go over it with a white brush. Now before I put my calendar on my charger, I'm going to take a little piece of chenille stem and make a loop and then wrap that around a few times. I'm using kind of an icky color. I probably won't be using this on anything that will be showing. And I'll hot glue that onto the back, and then I'm going to take a little piece of ribbon and put that horizontally across that hook, and then that way it'll stay nicely in place. And then I'm going to take my cross and I'm going to hot glue that right onto my calendar in the position that I want it. So it's kind of going in a clockwise, it's not kind of going in a clockwise direction, it is going in a clockwise direction. And then I'm going to take the back of it and gob lots and lots of glue on here so that it will attach to my charger, and then it's done. And here it is all finished, and I think this is so pretty. I was gonna, like I said, use the dark pink for the places where it's red, but I decided since this is gonna be a teachable instrument for my grandkids to tell them what the liturgical colors are, the red was gonna have to be red, and so I sacrificed a little bit of cuteness for the teaching moment. But I love how this turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. For this project, I'm using some adhesive tiles, a mirror, and of course some more foam board. I'm going to measure that right in half, and then I'll freehand kind of a scallop at the top. And then I'm going to use my craft knife to cut out one half of it. And this is going lengthwise, so it's longer. And then once I get that one side cut down, I'm going to flip it over like we did with anything that we want to be equal on both sides, and then cut out that other side. I want this to look kind of like a church window, so that's why I'm doing this shape. Now with another piece, I'm going to cut out some edges just like we did for our frame for our leaning sign, and I'm just going to do a whole bunch of those because this is going to go around our piece. Now I'm taking my tiles and I'm going to start pulling off the backing paper and just adding them onto my foam board, and this took a total of 10 pieces. And this part actually goes really fast. It's really fun too to piece them together. The edges are perfectly even, and so they just butt up right against each other and there's no gaps. Once this is all put together, I'm going to take my craft knife and flip my piece over and then just cut down those excess pieces. And then there'll be two little pieces on the edge. I'm just going to use scraps from the pieces I already cut off and then just plug those corners right in there and then cut off the excess of those. So now I'm going to take those strips and I'm going to hot glue those around the edge. The only tricky part is the curved portions of our little window. And so I'm going to kind of mold those pieces so that they have a curve without actually bending. And then I'm going to use my hot glue to put those in place. And the back side of my little strip is going to be flush with the back side of my window. It's not really a window, but you know what I mean. And then once I get those all pieced together, we have kind of a window frame. So now I'm going to take my mirror and I'm going to take the insides out so that I can paint the frame itself. And then at the same time, I'm going to paint my big church window, and I'm going to use my white chalk paint to do that. I first painted the outside of the frame, and then I'm going to take my Faux Annie Sloan paintbrush. That's the big wide ones that I got from Amazon, and I'll have that linked in the description box below. And I'm just going to paint that all over those 10 tiles, and then I don't want complete complete coverage, so I went back with a paper towel and just wiped some of those areas out. And then I'll do the same thing with my frame, and then I'm taking a dry brush and I'm going to distress it all with my hazelnut chalk paint. So once all my paint is dry, I'm going to take my frame, and on the back where the little tabs are that keep the mirror in place, I'm going to pop those straight out so that I can place it onto my window and then poke it into the foam board and the tiles. And then I'll replace the mirror inside of it and then glue it down onto my board. So now I'm going to take some Dollar Tree greenery, and using my wire cutters, I'm going to cut those all apart and then lay them out around my mirror in a circle to make a wreath. And then I'm just going to keep building on that. I used some Walmart, I think it's called Queen Anne's lace. It's like baby's breath. You'll see it here in a second. But man, that stuff is so messy. I don't know that I will use this again unless it's in a vase or something. But I'm going to take all of that, and using some green paddle wire, I'm going to attach it all together. And then any places that needs to be filled in or a little thicker, I can just slip it into that wire and make it fuller. And then once I get it all together, I'm going to take some nylon zip ties. I'm going to poke a hole into the foam board and then feed it through just like we did before, and then attach it on the back so that it stays snug as a bug in a rug. So now I'm going to take one of these Dollar Tree wooden crosses, and these light up, and I haven't been able to use this in very many projects, or any projects actually, but I wanted to use it for this one. It's perfect. I'm going to first stain it with my antique wax, and I taped it down onto my painting surface so it wouldn't keep moving around on me. And then I ended up doing the entire cross, and I'll just wipe that off as I go. And then take a black Sharpie and outline the area where the light turns on and off on the back. And I'm just going to trace it or rub it onto my foam board so that I can see where to cut out, so that now once I cut that out of the foam board, I'll have access to the little switch to turn that light on and off. And then once I get my hole cut out, I'm going to take my hot glue and attach it to the top of my wreath right over that hole, and it's done. And now I can let that little light of mine shine. And here it is, all finished, and I love this so much, and I really don't think you can tell that it's made out of Dollar Tree foam board, or any of these projects for that matter. Well, you guys know because you watched me make them, but anybody else that didn't see this video, I don't think they would know. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed these projects, and if you did, don't forget to give them a thumbs up, comment, let me know what you think. If you're not already, I hope you'll consider hitting that subscribe button down below, as well as the little bell right next to it, so that you can be notified every time I upload a brand new video. I hope everyone has a blessed day, and remember to always be the light. Bye!